Welcome to the Discovering Leadership podcast. My name's Corbin Hanus with Insurance. I'm joined by my co-host Carl Bowden from Exemplify Leadership. Carl, you want to tell us what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about relationships and how can we lead leaders. In today's episode, we're going to be covering topics such as the multiplication of growth, the compounding effect that it has when we lead leaders. We're going to create more time for our priorities and build a sustainable mission around our business. We're going to talk about planning for the future and the beginnings of a legacy, a lasting legacy, a business that lasts beyond ourselves. Now, the purpose of the podcast is to invest in you. We want to invest the foundations of leadership within you. Some of those values, such as integrity, empathy, communication, service to others. Our goal is to lead leaders, to build a community of leaders, and to help us lead by example. So, the first part of the Leading Leaders episode is going to be over the multiplication of growth, that compounding effect that we have when we lead leaders. So, Corbin, when we lead leaders, that multiplies.
Oh, yeah.
When we lead followers, that just adds. So, what are some examples of leading leaders within business or just within our society?
Oh, yeah. So leading leaders for a business often looks like, to me, bringing new people on the team and letting them take control of their own operations. That could be through a franchise, that could be through, say, like an agency, or it could be completely internally with a decentralized structure. Outside of business, it looks a lot more to me like the spreading of religion throughout the world. Religion spreads really fast. It's because people own that purpose and they'll take it with them and provide that purpose to others as well.
Yeah, especially with religion, it's kind of like discipling other people. When we have a disciple or someone that heads on a church, they're a leader and they're leading other followers, and then there's another leader of a church and then they're leading other followers, so that multiplies. Now if we only had one leader, then there would just be those followers, and we would just add to the growth, not multiply. And
Yeah.
Corbin, what you said about franchises, it's kind of a similar model in a way, because you're leading, you're getting leaders to lead another branch of the business.
Yeah.
And then that is just multiplying the reach, the awareness of whatever business that you're running. So, those are really good examples. It kind of reminds me of compound interest too.
Yeah.
What's that quote?
So yeah, I believe it was Albert Einstein. Uh,
Yeah, I
Getting
think
my
that's it.
historical figures mixed up. That's the normal for me though. But he said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Essentially, he who understands it earns it. He who doesn't understand it pays it. Um, it really just means that if you're not going to be a leader, you're going to be a follower. And it's whenever you have leaders as your followers, you will be able to grow the amount of followers you have over time a lot quicker. Uh, that's really just the simplest terms what the topic of this podcast episode is about. If your followers are leaders in their own, then they bring more followers with them. If your followers are just followers and they're not leaders of their own, then they're only bringing themselves
Yeah.
to the table.
This also kind of reminds me of back when I was an undergrad. A lot of people on the podcast might know that I got my undergrad in wildlife conservation biology,
Yeah.
and I was studying population biology. biology and reproduction habits. It kind of reminds me of a linear or exponential growth curve model. And if any of you guys listening are science nerds like me, you might recognize this, but it's so true when it comes to leading leaders or having this compound effect. So there's a linear growth model where we're just adding. So let's say we take 1 plus 2, that equals 3. Then we take 3 plus 2, that equals 5. 5 plus 2 equals 7. So we're increasing by 2 really every time we add 2.
Yeah.
So we go all the way up to 11, let's say.
Yeah.
And then the exponential model would be 1 times 2 equals 2. And then 2 times 2 equals 4. 4 times 2 equals 8. 8 times 2 equals 16. And we just keep multiplying by 2. Now, if we do that the same number of times, we'll get to 11 with the linear model, but we'll get to 32 with that exponential growth model by multiplying. And we're doing is either adding 2 or multiplying 2. But with the exponential model, you know, we have more than double the growth.
Yeah.
And it's the same effect when we're talking about leading leaders, when we're starting a franchise, or we're thinking about compound interest. It really is kind of like the eighth wonder of the world, like Einstein said.
Yeah.
Um, but the goal is to lead leaders. That's where we can really make a substantial impact in what we do, the mission that we want to accomplish, the purpose that we're trying to communicate to others. Now, we can also create more time for our priorities when we lead leaders. So, those priorities could be, just focusing on what gives us the most return.
Yeah.
What are some examples of,
That could be like
focusing?
if you're focusing within your business on something that gives you the most return, that's like sales or potentially people development and focusing on the culture of the business internally. There's a lot of different things that really help out. To me, it's more so like it allows you to focus on working on your business as opposed to working in your business. If you're always managing the people that you work with, if you're always doing the job for them or correcting them, then you're always going to be working in the business and the business isn't going to grow. But if you bring leaders into the mix and you allow leaders to own their responsibilities and really grow their own role within your business, then it's going to allow you as the owner to step back, look at the business holistically, and work on the business as opposed to just working in it. Like I said, that could be in the form of sales, where you're always working on sales, or developing that culture, developing the people that you're working with. It could be focusing on your business model or your product and service development. There's a lot of different ways you can really grow a business by having leaders within it. If you're always doing the job for the people, you're not going to have nearly enough time to be able to really grow an effective business.
Mm. I want to ask a few questions just to clarify on that, Corbin. So, when we're talking about on versus in,
Yep.
when we're talking about on, is that more like holistic thinking, upper level type thinking, visionary thinking, and is in the business? Does that mean like kind of working on the ground floor on like the day to day tasks? What is
That's exactly it. So
that's it?
if you're working on the business, it's think of you start your business and you have a X amount of page business plan in front of you. That business plan, whenever you're focused on that business plan and you're modifying it, you're growing it, whatever it might be, then you're working on the business. That business plan is the business. If you're working in the business plan, that means you're just referring back to the business plan to be able to get a job done. You're out there providing your products or services for your customers or clients. You're out there doing all the dirty work and the day to day tasks. And in that regard, you're again referring back to the business plan. It's like an outline for helping you get your work done. And essentially how you work, whether that's within your marketing, your sales, your internal activities, your legal stuff, whatever it might be, your business plan's that outline that's you're going to refer back to and utilize that to really get the job done. Whereas, again, if you're just sitting down, you're looking over that business plan, you're taking that big picture approach, you're thinking of it holistically, and you're modifying things to say drive that bottom line a little bit more or increase your revenue, say bring in a new customer segment, start providing a new product or service, whatever it might be, that's where you're looking at working on the business as opposed to in the business.
That makes sense. So with on the business, you're focused on that business plan. What
Right.
are the overarching goals? And
Yep.
then in the business is really that day to day,
Oh yeah.
what's happening with the people, what services are you providing, what products you might be selling, things like that.
Yep.
Awesome. When we're talking about creating more time for our priorities too, I think of, just creating a healthy lifestyle in this as well, creating more balance for our lives. We have to be aware of where we're putting our time. Are these our priorities? Are they ultimately going to give us a return on our investment? So, maybe we're focusing on finances one day and we're focused on family, outside the business another day.
Yeah.
We have to be aware, are we healthy to lead others? Are we balancing out our lives where we get the most return on our investment in time? We also need to be more present when we're giving our time. We have to give people our attention and live in the moment with whatever we're doing. Because when we live in the moment, then that shows that we care about others. We're willing to invest in others and ourselves by really giving ourselves, our full attention.
Oh yeah. It's like to me an example of that. It reminds me of this last tax season. I had to take some time off to just on a day-to-day basis. Every week I'd take some time off in the middle of the day to go work out. Luckily, I got a gym here in my office, so it'd be like in the middle of the day. It wouldn't be too difficult. It would be easy. I'd already be here at the gym pretty much. I just got to walk downstairs and I can get at it. But that's a process and something that can take an hour out of each day, you know. Um, Nonetheless, I have to be able to take that time to live that healthy lifestyle that I really want for myself. I've got to be able to balance out everything so that whenever I do get to these high priority items, I'm able to do them much more effectively. Uh, it's it's similar to like whenever I hire somebody. See, this it's not like a direct correlation between these two examples, but um, whenever I hire somebody, if I hand them all of a certain set of tasks, say if I was every time a client brought over their tax documents, they brought all their stuff, I would go to the printer, I would scan all of them in, and then I'd download them on the laptop. I'd bring them up to our online system where we're going to store everything. I'm going to categorize them in all the different folders that they need to be categorized in. And then I take all the time to put all that information into our tax program so I can build out the tax return. And then I got to review it and then sit down with the client and actually work on it. That takes hours and hours to do that whole process. Whereas I can bring somebody on my team, have them accept the documents, scan them in, put them on their laptop, upload them to the system we use to keep stuff, categorize everything, put them all the data into our prep software. They can bring the return over to me, and then I can do reviewing and sitting down with the client because those are the high value items that the client perceives that they really want, and that's what I might be better at. So it allows me to spend if went from spending say 3 hours doing all of that to 1 hour just doing the last couple of steps, then in a single day, if I'm going to work 9 hours, That goes from doing 3 tax returns to doing 9.
Yeah.
Like that. Really quickly, I'm able to increase my productivity, increase what we're able to do in our capacity right away just by hiring one person. Now, in all actuality, life doesn't go exactly like that. But in all actuality, sometimes it doesn't work exactly like that. Sometimes you might not say build something that lasts. And you need to think about, well, if say I hired somebody, for example, and bring them on as that tax preparer, where they're taking all those documents, putting the return together, handing it over to me, and then I work with the client. But eventually I need to still be working on the business throughout tax season. So now it's okay. How many tax returns can I realistically review during tax season while also working on the business? Say doing sales, say doing some marketing activities, and doing X, Y, Z else. I have to make sure that I can build something that lasts. If it's my responsibility to sign every single tax return, then what happens when I'm not there?
Mm, that's very true. When we lead leaders, that's ultimately building a sustainable mission. Because when we lead leaders and we're not there, they have it taken care of. They know what to do in order to keep the ball rolling, to keep the business running effectively. So we have to give others the power to lead. And when we do that, that brings consistency to the business, to our mission and what we do in order to build a sustainable business. When we lead leaders, they're able to bring consistency. Another way we can be consistent is developing or implementing processes and systems led by those leaders that we lead. Now, Corbin, you do a really good job of implementing these processes and systems within your business. I was wondering if you could give us a few examples of ways that you lead leaders to take out these processes and systems.
Yeah, so SOPs, systems and processes, whatever you want to call it, those are vital to your business. The way I see it, and what one of my old professors or previous professors had mentioned to me, is you have to make it easy enough that any dummy could do it. If you have no systems and processes in place, then you're really going to be reliant upon making sure that you find people that are already leaders, people that are already the cream of the crop employees. And you have to, at that point, expect them to walk in the door and be like, oh, I already know what to do. And for a business like mine, where we're doing taxes and accounting, I can't rely on anybody to already know what to do. It's very complicated. There's a lot of different moving parts. There's a lot of different factors to take into place. Every client situation is completely different from the next. So, looking at systems and processes and documenting everything is very, very important. Uh, the way we do things is, or like I was mentioning in the example earlier, if I bring on a new employee and they do the first 3 steps where they get documents from clients, they upload it on the computer, file it, and then prepare the return, how are they going to know to do that if I never told them in the first place, or if we didn't have it documented, steps 1 through X
Yeah.
are this, just this step by step, and handing that documentation off to them so that they can really take it and go. If they have no idea what they're doing and they can't see the overall process, and the reasoning why they're doing stuff, the reasoning behind their actions, then they're operating blind. And at that point, they're not learning at all.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very vital that you have systems and processes. Otherwise, whenever you walk away from the business for whatever reason, whether it's temporary or permanent, then people are going to be staring at each other like, oh, I don't know what to do. You might be confident in your employees that you brought on people and say they've been working for you for the last 20 years, but what happens after them? What if you retire, and your business is still running, but then your top dog decides to retire too? Those are things that it's like, okay, now when we're bringing new people on, how do we make them as efficient as possible? Uh, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You brought it into my mind. They could just be gone for work a single day. Think about the time that you say had a job in high school or college, and it was just that menial, tedious task kind of job, and you got to sit around, and half of your job is waiting on somebody else, your manager or the one person above you, to do all the work, and they didn't show up for the day. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. And, as we grow in business, we have to have some structure. And with that structure comes those processes and systems. When we have those in place, we're able to multiply our growth going forward. So, as a startup business, and if you don't have those processes and systems, it's okay at the start because that's when you're starting to bring all your ideas into play. But once you start to hire, you start to add new branches, you start to multiply your effect when you're leading leaders, then we have to have some type of standard operating procedure so we are consistent in what we do. Now, ultimately, we're going to be planning for our future when we lead leaders. It's really the beginnings of a legacy. So, when we are leading leaders, we are creating more time and space for visionary thinking and forethought. So, what's going to be happening next in the business? Where do we want things to go in the business? We have to create the time and space for visionary thinking. There's a quote by Maya Angelou that states, "You cannot really know where you're going until you know where you have been." Now, when we think of that quote, we think of reflecting. What happened in the past? What worked well? What didn't work so well? But then we're also thinking, where are we going in the future? Now, without leading leaders, it's hard for us to really slow down and think about these things. As the leader of your business, we have to give ourselves the time to think about visionary thinking, where we want to go with the business. We have to give ourselves the time to reflect, think, and plan for what comes next.
Yeah,
What could we improve on, and how do we take our business or maybe our life from here on out? It's so crucial. We have to give ourselves time to reflect, think, and plan for what comes next.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of a big lesson that I've learned through having people on my team, and uh, to me, it's in a lot of ways structure can be good, but structure is bad. But making sure that communication is present and my ability to communicate the vision and purpose behind what we're doing is very important. Uh, I can have all of these systems and processes in place, but if, like I said, people don't know why they're doing what they're doing, then there's a good chance they're not going to do it. If they have this menial, tedious task that they keep doing over and over and over again, but they don't want to do it and they don't know why they're doing it, then they're going to stop doing it because they don't want to do it, and they're not going to figure out why they were doing it until they stop doing it and a problem arises. Now, having all of the structure in place is important for getting tasks done the right way. But too much structure can be very bad. If I try to provide structure to every little thing that my employee does, from how they format and every character that's in an email subject, and for one portion of an email, or an email that's one portion of an overall process. It's like, does that really matter? It's like the formatting there might not matter too much. I can provide some structure as to here's basic formatting you should use, and here's why, because it's helpful for me when I'm looking at my inbox. But if I'm sitting there and forcing them to use the email, and I tell them every time they send an email without the perfect structure behind it that they're doing it wrong, now that's going to hold us back in a lot of different ways because I'm focusing on micromanaging. I'm focusing on
Yeah.
tedious tasks that don't really matter and get the overall job done. It's like I still had the information at the end of the day. They provided me with the email with all the stuff that I needed to be able to continue the process. It's like that. All of the structure is important, but it's not needed all of the time. That vision behind why they have the structure is important so they can provide it. I can say, hey, if you put your emails to me in this specific format, it's it makes my life easier. And if they got the time and they're willing to make my life a little bit easier, then they're going to go ahead and do it because they'll be happy to. Uh,
You know, it kind of reminds me of parenting as well. When we're thinking about structure versus no structure,
yeah,
or discipline versus no discipline in a way too, because there's a balance to it. We have to have a balance in, whether we're running our business or we're leading our children. There has to be a balance in that. So we have to have kind of some flexibility within the structure in order to adjust or adapt when needed. I think that applies a lot to parenting, or it might apply to the business. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about in our series called Crafting Strategy. And, we might have an end destination, but oftentimes that end destination is not a straight line, a straight path to get there.
yeah.
We have to weave and curve throughout all these different waypoints along the path in order to get there. So it does require a little bit of flexibility. But are we keeping the end goal in sight, the mission at the forefront?
Oh yeah. That's no process is going to be perfect. We're always constantly molding ours, whether that's because we want to be more efficient or because we want to provide more value to our clients. Sometimes we change things up just because the client complains. Uh, Other times, I'll if a client reaches out, I'll tell them, "Hey, here's why we're doing that stuff," and then we just got to fill in the gaps of knowledge and make sure to communicate with clients. Uh, there's it's got to figure out, okay, what's the bare minimum needed. It's one of the we were talking about franchises earlier. One of the biggest franchises in the world is McDonald's. Everybody knows about McDonald's. No,
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that hasn't eaten at McDonald's, you know? Uh, McDonald's model is their end customer, the actual McDonald's business, their end customer isn't you or I going to eat a Big Mac. They don't care about that. What they really want is to find new franchise owners. They want to find leaders because that's what grows their business. They want to find people that can help grow their business, create more stores, and really build the brand. Now, those leaders aren't going to come to them with no value. McDonald's has to be able to provide value to these leaders. If these leaders were starting an entire business from scratch, then they wouldn't go to McDonald's. They would just start an entire business from scratch.
Yeah.
So McDonald's provides these procedures. They provide the structure. They provide a lot of things of value to help out with making sure these leaders can grow to their greatest potential. Whenever they're doing that, McDonald's provides the bare minimum structure. You have to make sure that any dummy could do the work. And
Well, it was like what you were saying earlier. You have to make it almost stupid simple.
yes,
Something really easy and effective, easy to pass down from one leader to the next.
exactly. It's that business continuity.
Yeah.
If it's not super easy for anybody to understand, then those leaders that you pass all this work on to, they're going to have a lot harder of time to grow it. If they have to be very stringent on the leaders that they need to find, then they're gonna be very it's gonna be harder for them to find those leaders or those followers to bring on and grow their own team, therefore growing your team. Think about that long term, those long term topics when it comes to it. That's where the sustainability of the mission, the business continuity comes in, planning for the future. And this is what creates time for you, helps you multiply the growth of the business. It's looking at really the it's the harder way of doing things in one sense, but it's also much easier than doing everything yourself. If you try to do everything yourself, you're going to fail. If you have other people help you out, then you'll succeed a lot more often than not.
And that reminds me of kind of our slogan with the Discovery and Leadership podcast. Alone we survive, but together we thrive.
Exactly.
We have to have people around us to hold us accountable, push us, encourage us, and lead us to effectively make positive change
Yeah.
and to lead the example that we want to see in the world. So when we're leading leaders, a few questions I have for our podcast audience. What happens after you are gone? What impact do you want to make in your business? And how can you create greatness? This is the beginnings of leading a legacy, is through leading leaders. So build your legacy through your people. I encourage you to write this down. Hold yourself accountable and tell this to other people. Make sure they know so they can hold you accountable. Lead leaders to be great. Always invest in your people. Now, for our next topic, our next series, we're going to be talking about delegation. This is our last episode for relationships, but we're going to be hitting on delegation for our next episode, our next series, and we're going to be talking about establishing trust. How do we establish trust with the people that we delegate to, with the leaders that we lead? Now, you can catch that episode not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday following. And you can find it on all your streaming services. So whether that be Google, Apple, Spotify, whatever works best for you.
Yep. Make sure you head on over to the Enturian website. That's enturian.com, enturian.com. Also, make sure you check out exemplifyleadership.com. We post updates for all of the podcast stuff and videos, etc., on our social media, every different platform. We got links on our websites. You can also go to the YouTube channel for Inturian if you want to see the video format for our podcast. You can watch us talk to our interviewees as we're doing stuff. Pretty cool. Make sure you head on over there, subscribe, follow, check it out. Just remember, as Carl was saying, alone
Alone
we
we
survive,
survive,
but
but
together
together
we
we
thrive.
thrive.
See you on the next episode.